This is Alan Melville, Dispatch 13, 2100 hours, 6th of June, from the beach west of Ouistreham. Hello everyone, this is Alan Melville speaking from the beach just west of the little village of Ouistreham. The paratroops are landing. They're landing all around me as I speak. They've come in from the sea and they're fluttering down, red, white and blue parachutes fluttering down, and they're just about the best thing that we've seen for a good many hours. They're showering in, there's no other word for it, pouring in threes and fours, and they're fluttering down in perfect formation, just the way we've seen it on the newsreels, the way we've seen it done in exercises, and here they're doing it the real thing, and believe me, they haven't come any too late. There'll be a very unpleasant surprise to the enemy, who's fighting. I can still see the signs of a typical panzer battle. You can hear the aircraft roaring over me, I expect, as I speak. I can still see the signs of a typical panzer battle being raged on the slightly high ground just about 3 or 4 miles ahead of me. And these paratroops are coming down between where I'm speaking, which is just above the sand dunes. Down they come. They're being attacked pretty harshly, as you'll hear, but they're landing in great force between the sand dunes, between the beach area and the battle, and they may have a very decisive effect on that battle. Jerry's putting up to try and stave this surprise eventuality off, but he isn't able to cope. The aircraft are sweeping inland, letting go their valuable cargo, sweeping round as if nothing mattered, and tearing again out to sea. And they're still coming in. I'm just turning around to look out to sea, and I can see away out to the very horizon. They're coming in flood after flood.
It's 9 p.m. on D-Day, and they very much are coming in at Cotentin and coming in over and beyond the British beaches. Huge reinforcements as the dusk arrives and as the night falls. Mission Keokuk. 32 Horsa gliders of the 434th U.S. Troop Carrier Group land north of Eastville. They have 160 men from Medical Corps and headquarters. They also have 40 jeeps, 6 motorbikes, 6 57mm guns, and 19 tons of stuff for the 101st Airborne. The Battle of Neuville, north of Sainte-Mère-Église, was several hours ago, but the Germans still have not advanced against the town itself. The brave stand of Turnbull's platoon showed the enemy that the Americans were no pushovers and that even a small force of entrenched paratroopers can be incredibly tough to overcome. And now, with the 82nd Airborne having spent the whole afternoon preparing their defenses in and around the town, the Germans are very hesitant to stage a frontal assault without good support. Nevertheless, their large buildup at Neuville cannot be ignored. Vandervoort orders one of the spotters from the U.S. Navy, who made his jump into Normandy with the Airborne, to see if he can pick up anyone on his radio. And this he manages to do. The gunners of Battleship Nevada promptly answer, sending several 14-inch shells towards Neuville to further dissuade the Germans from trying anything funny. This is not just a display of the wide difference in resources and firepower between the two sides. This also decides that Sainte-Mère-Église will remain in American hands for the rest of D-Day. As the sun goes down, the commanders of the airborne forces are ready to call it a day. The surviving paratroopers are exhausted, and most of them have been in constant action through both night and day. Yet everyone is well aware that D-Day is only a step up a long ladder leading to Hitler's downfall. They've kicked in the door, they've started the battle for Normandy, but the Germans are not beaten, not by a long shot, and there will be little chance to get much sleep this night. We were all dead tired. We got to Eastville, verified that we had the place well defended, and then Brigadier General Tony McAuliffe, the 101st Artillery Commander, and I decided to get some sleep. We got upstairs in this farmhouse where there were 2 lumpy beds. Tony undressed, and I said, "Tony, you better keep your pants on, because this thing isn't in the bag by any means." But against my advice, he undressed. We had just gotten to sleep when the Krauts came in and bombed the hell out of the place. And the question was, who could get down the stairs first? I had my pants on, and I had a definite advantage, so I got downstairs before Tony could. But it almost wrecked my feet. Overall, despite bad drops, the American airborne divisions have achieved what they were sent to do. The causeways were kept open for the advance of the 4th Division, and the elimination of many artillery batteries took a lot of pressure away from Utah Beach. There is also the successful conquest or liberation of many towns and villages at strategically important crossroads and bridges that has paved the way for the days to come. The gamble of the airborne drop has paid off. Isolated, scattered, left with meager resources, the paratroopers have shown the determination, courage, and resilience necessary to still follow through with the original plan. Of the 14,000 airborne troopers, glidermen, and crewmen sent into the Cotentin Peninsula, 2,500 of them will be declared dead or captured, a casualty rate that could have easily been much higher. And now, with both sides beginning to dig in for the night, it is still the Allies that hold the initiative. The Germans have been allowed to stage only a few localized counterattacks, nothing even remotely strong or concentrated enough to become an actual threat to the invasion force. All that is left to do is keep the momentum going. Matt Ridgway closes the Airborne's day at 9:51 p.m. with a single message. To all regiments, proud of you. Inform all ranks. Operation Mallard reaches its conclusion. 256 gliders are towed in by numbers 38 and 48 Group RAF. 246 arrive successfully. The gliders do not have any of the problems that the ones last night had, since it's still daylight when they arrive. They do run into AA fire, and they land at 2 landing zones. One west of the canal, landing zone W, east of Saint-Auban-d'Arkenay, and one to the east of it, landing zone north of Ranville. The troops landed at LZW are the rest of the 2nd Battalion Oxford and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, OBLI, and A Company, 12th Battalion Devonshire Regiment. At LZN, it's the 1st Battalion Royal Ulster Rifles, the 6th Airborne's Armoured Reconnaissance Regiment, and the 6th Air Landing Brigade Headquarters. They have Tetrarch light tanks with them. This is the first time a tank has been flown into battle. Arriving soon after at LZN is a battery of the 53rd Air Landing Light Regiment with 8 75mm pack howitzers. There is an important side effect of these arrivals. Since Feuchtinger thinks they might cut off 21st Panzer Division's communications, he orders all units that are near the beaches to pull back to north of Caen.
And things are shutting down ever more on some more of the beaches.
Giraud arrives at 5th Corps headquarters north of Saint-Laurent. He has 2 items on his agenda: communications and possible enemy armor counterattacks. They have no contact with Utah or Gold at this point, so if the Germans counterattack this night, 5th Corps is on its own. By this time, Major P.C. Steele's Y Company of KSLI has advanced to Le Bissé Wood, just over a kilometer north of Caen. They are there by the time the sun goes down, but all the small action en route and the fight for Hillman all day means the 192nd Panzer Grenadiers have beaten them to it. This position is hedges and high-standing crops and has very little visibility, especially once the sun goes down this hour. Major Steele, in fact, is killed just then, so the Shropshires pull back. They are not reaching Caen this night. They will settle for the night around Bieville and Beuville an hour or so from now. The 2nd Warwicks are on their left. They've gone all the way around to near the Caen Canal, leaving one company in Bénouville, then marching up the canal to Blainville, where they dig in. 2nd East Yorks reach Saint-Auban-d'Arkenay by the end of the day. The 1st Suffolks are interrogating a group of 50 or so Germans at Hillman when hundreds of planes suddenly fly across from out at sea. This is Operation Mallard, to reinforce 6 airborne. The 256 gliders, some of which carry tanks, are, almost needless to say, a huge morale boost for the men here. By this time though, the Suffolks are not going to go any further towards Caen, and they consolidate and rest for the night, digging in at 10 p.m. just beyond Hillman. Some historians have criticized the Suffolks for their delay in subduing Hillman, WN-17, and the divisional and brigade commanders for being too formulaic. But under the circumstances, once the first attack had failed, it is difficult to see what else could have been done, for there was no means of bypassing the position. Simply put, no one had expected such a vicious defense of an underrated but formidable obstacle. 2nd Battalion Essex Regiment reaches Saint-Sulpice under 2 kilometers from Bayeux to the northeast. The South Wales borderers will reach Vaux-sur-Aure just north of Bayeux around midnight, and the 2nd Battalion Gloucester Regiment reaches Magny between the two, also around midnight. These are the battalions of the 56th Infantry Brigade. Later on, at 10:30, 47 Commando finally reaches the high ground south of Port-en-Besson and digs in near WS-72. They will not attack it this day. At around 11 p.m., 69th Brigade digs in for the night, a bit more than a kilometer short of Route 13, the main road from Bayeux to Caen. But Bayeux was General Graham's goal for 50th Division for the day. So, is not actually reaching or taking it a failure? Some do not think so. It was nothing of the sort. Graham was being prudent, and his formation was already dominating, if not actually occupying, all the terrain he had been allocated. By nightfall, the 50th Division had not quite reached all their ambitious objectives, due to the delays imposed by the opposition and the weather. Yet they had delivered in style, with every significant German position in their sector overwhelmed, and a major city on the verge of capture. At Gold Beach, the Atlantic Wall had not merely been penetrated, it had been irreparably torn asunder.
You may have noticed that we haven't said much about Utah Beach at all over the past few hours.
Well, the battle action at that beach is over, but let's take a look back as night falls at the 3-act drama of Utah Beach. Utah Beach. What exactly are we looking at from like end to end?
Well, this is one of the best vantage positions in this area of Normandy because we can see right over there to Pointe du Hoc where the Rangers scaled the cliffs to get to the guns there. Beyond that is Omaha Beach and then Gold and Juno and Sword. We've got the Sainte Marcouf Islands out there too, French islands that had Napoleonic fortresses where, in fact, the first troops who set foot on the coast did so on those islands to make sure there were no Germans there. There were, in fact, just mines, and the first men killed were on those mines there.
Who was the first man killed?
Well, there's an interesting little snippet there. Is the first American killed on Utah Beach was not an American and was not killed on Utah Beach.
Okay.
He was in the 4th Cavalry Reconnaissance Unit that landed there. He was a skiing instructor from Trondheim, Norway, who landed there, stepped on a mine, and along with other guys, got killed there. So he's in the American military, of course, but he's not an American national. And although this counts as the Utah sector, it's not actually the Utah Beach. So that's why it is that weird phenomena there.
Now, just looking at the lower bluffs here, on first glance, it seems like this might be an easier job to make landings in advance. Is that the case?
Well, yes, but it's the middle of a 3-act play here, essentially, in that Utah Beach needs to be taken in consideration with the role of the 82nd and the 101st over there that had started 6-7 hours before all this starts here. And they have already done that job of landing there, securing the choke points, the crossroads, the towns, and particularly the causeways through the floods from Utah Beach, because Utah Beach is separated from the rest of Normandy by this massive great floodplain behind the beach that it's all part of the Germans' defense. So the paratroopers have begun the assault on Utah Beach already before these guys get here. So the middle act of landing here on the beach, in fact about half a mile down the road from where we're standing, went really well, and the losses were comfortably under what they projected. The Germans didn't have much to stop the landing. The bombing by the 9th Air Force had been a bit more successful here than on Omaha Beach. The Germans didn't put up much of a fight, and they're off the beach pretty quickly. And then we're looking at probably the best preserved single Widerstands nest in Normandy, which is the resistance nest the Germans have every half a mile of. And here we have everything showing the early 1942 bunkers up to the later 1944 one. There's an 88 up there, 250mm there, machine guns up there, mortars, and behind we have the ammunition areas. And the difference between how we're seeing it today and how we would have seen it 79 years ago is that the trenches between these bunkers have long since gone away, the barbed wire around them has long since gone, and the automatic flamethrowers and minefields around them has long since gone.
Yeah, that makes a difference.
It does, except they didn't work. University along behind Utah Beach, these are little, well, I say little, they're full of gasoline, about the yay big, and it works on a wire, and when it ignites and becomes something like electronic lighter thing, it sprays out flame for X number of minutes on a predetermined arc, but the system failed on D-Day where the landings took place, so it didn't come to be a problem for anybody. But yeah, this is the place to come to see the folly of the German Atlantic Wall in these impressive bunkers that look really cool, and yet as a broad concept behind the 5 beaches, they lasted only a few hours. All this money and effort and engineering and steel and concrete delays the Allies for a day.
For a day.
But the third act, and it's the third act that gets overlooked, is that the whole reason of landing on Utah Beach is to move up to Cherbourg and capture that deep water harbour. Because although there's the artificial harbour Mulberry technology, it would be really good if we could get our hands on a harbour. So after the landings, the 22nd Infantry of the 4th Division have to push their way up towards us, and they are now assaulting the positions that they had been coming at from the sea the day before, although the one's further to the north, but they're now going up the beach, so every half a mile is now a new defensive position that they have to take on. Okay. And the Germans who are here are now stuck in that they can't really go anywhere else, because they can't go that way because there's paratroopers over there holding over there, there's floods restricting their movement anyway, so they might as well hold on here. So the damage we're seeing on the bunkers behind us is from June the 7th and June the 8th.
I've spoken a lot about the motivation, about how, you know, there's a lack of motivation overall on the German side at this point. But that's not really the case here, is it?
Well, yeah, there's just a little bit more oomph about these Germans here. There's the 91st Air Landing Division that are headquartered a few miles in that way, and Major General Falley, who'd been part of them, they'd arrived here a few weeks earlier, which causes the drop zones to be moved. They're highly motivated because they are an anti-airborne landing swift response unit. So they've got a bit of kind of pizzazz about them. Cherbourg was considered by the Germans quite a kind of cushy post. There's quite an example of technology. It's like a mini version of the U-boat ports down in Brittany. Lots of defences, lots of bunkers, lots of propaganda work going up in Cherbourg. Germans taking photos of the stuff they're building. So I would say your average German here is feeling a little bit more confident about the overall plan of the Third Reich. There are, as usual, the sort of 40% non-German troops here, but they include some Hungarian troops inland who are putting up a real resistance. There were some Chechen troops serving at Lafayette, where the paratroopers were. Yeah. So it's a bit of a better set of Germans here.
Wow. And over at the horizon, what is it that we look at there?
Absolutely. That's the Barfur Peninsula and Saint-Valer Ogue, and beyond that is Cherbourg. Okay. And so as they push up that way, the 4th Division and the other units, the 90th, the 79th, they're then encountering Bocage, which we're going to go and explore with you guys later on. They're discovering how little ridges, the Kinneville Ridge, which runs perpendicular to the beach about 4 miles, maybe 3 miles north of here. It took the 4th Division 4 days to get there, and a 3-day battle to take that ridge, because of just the concentration of the elevation the Germans had, the fact these Germans are pretty motivated, as you said earlier. And so a lot to see from this position here. It's the end of the chapter of June the 6th in a way, but it's the beginning of the new chapter of pushing up to Cherbourg. And this is the battle that gets overlooked, because the 4th Infantry Division are seen as, well, you just walked ashore on D-Day. And they kind of did walk ashore on D-Day. Less than 200 men killed on Utah Beach out of 24,000 plus coming ashore there. But within a week, it's got worse. Within a month, I mean, it's crazy. From the June the 6th to the end of June, I think it's something like 24,000 casualties within the 4th Division, killed, wounded, and missing. So that's the number of division. Every man's on average been replaced already, and we haven't even got to Cherbourg by this point, or we've got to Cherbourg, but more correctly, it's been damaged by the Germans in a very successful sabotage operation, which means we can't use it. So the 3 acts are what we've got to remember here. The first act, paratroopers. Second act, as I said, a fairly comfortable, probably is a better word than easy landing, but then this difficult push up towards a German fortress, and it is a fortress in Cherbourg. The gun batteries up there, several of them. There's Germans are installing V1 positions and things like that, so they've got the support network for that. So this is where the third act gets going, and it's the third act that gets overlooked. And this is all something that the Allies hadn't really predicted. They had assumed that the push up to Cherbourg would take a week, and when it becomes a 3-week, 4-week ordeal, and you've got 4 divisions ending up heading for Cherbourg, and they are divisions that, with the benefit of hindsight, might have been better used pushing towards Saint-Lô, because this isn't taking us to Germany. That's the thing. The geography here is, this isn't the way we want to go.
Well, that goes to New York, right?
Yeah, but essentially, we want to go to Germany over there. So this is a sideshow, but that's belittling it. It's a very important job. Essentially, it's mirroring what the 6th Airborne are doing all the way to the east, except they've got a ridge of ground they're holding. This is a peninsula. It's the entire Cotentin Peninsula. So until 7th Corps have done their job of cutting across the peninsula, pushing up and seizing Cherbourg, 5th Corps and the rest of the Allies, they're stuck over there to the east, waiting for this to happen so they can swing their army round. And we talked to the British Airborne sector about the swinging of Montgomery's round. All this has to happen first. And the battle for the Cotentin Peninsula is the real battle for Utah Beach. And the actual landings on June the 6th are just the first chapter of a very, very brutal, very, very bloody battle. And I have to say, when the men had completed that mission, when the men of the 79th Division, the 4th, had got to Cherbourg and they find it's been damaged, it's like, well, what was this all for then? Yeah. And that's not good for soldiers to feel that everything they've been doing for the previous few weeks was a waste of time.
And men. There takes a real dedication, I guess, to really deal with feelings like that, I think, with futility and all. But also, how about the dedication of operating knowing that you are likely to die?
To paraphrase Thomas Hobbes, life for many of SOE's agents in occupied France is nasty, brutish, and short. Just ask Noor Inayat Khan. When she was arrested back in October 1943, the average life expectancy for a radio operator like her was just 6 weeks. Now she languishes in a German prison, shackled hand and foot. Even as the SOE have rebuilt their clandestine networks in towns and cities across France, the Germans have inflicted brutal losses and are capturing agents with alarming ease. The story is the same with the rural bands of resistance fighters known as the Maquis. As they grow ever larger, stronger, and more confident, the Germans begin a campaign of merciless reprisals. In the mountains and countryside of South and Central France, the situation approaches all-out war. As I mentioned earlier in the coverage of SOE activities, their losses and the near collapse of the French resistance in the run-up to D-Day is highly knit to the Gestapo rolling up the Prosper circuit in 1943. By mid-1943, Prosper and its sub-circuits had 10,000 fighters ready to be mobilized. But it is this size that spells its downfall. So many SOE networked agents clustered together in and around Paris poses a risk simply by the numbers and geographical concentration. It doesn't help that some of the officers have become complacent. They share flats and meet at cafes to play cards. A perfect storm forms when the Germans arrest two Canadian SOE agents, Frank Pickersgill and John Kenneth McAllister, on June 21st. They are not part of Prosper, but have arrived to set up a new network, Archdeacon. But the information they press from the arrested men opens high-level entry points to Prosper. What they have learned before, and the security blunders by multiple Prosper agents, then enables them to quickly roll up the network, and already by the end of the month, they have Prosper leader Francis Sutil, his radio operator Gilbert Normand, and his courier André Borel in custody. The man that leads the charge and now becomes the scourge of the SOE, doing the most to hinder the service's plans to build resistance around Paris and in northern France in the run-up to D-Day, is Hans-Josef Kiefer, SS Sturmbannführer and head of the Sicherheitsdienst, the SD, in Paris since 1940. Kiefer has been gathering intelligence on Prosper for quite some time. His secret weapon is a man named Henri Dericourt. He's a French pilot who works for SOE, transporting agents and material in and out of France. Crucially, Dericourt has been supplying Kiefer with letters sent to and from SOE agents in the field. Armed with this information, which covers both personal and operational matters, Kiefer begins his interrogations. The Gestapo have already tortured their captives, physically and mentally. They have withheld food and water, prevented them from sleeping, and have broken one of Sutil's arms. But Kiefer takes a different approach. While he is more than willing to use violence to get what he wants, his modus operandi is to present himself as a gentleman, a friend even. He promises his prisoners that he can make everything better if only they cooperate with him. When it comes to the Prosper captives, he brandishes the knowledge given to him by Dericourt and tries to convince them that the SOE has been thoroughly infiltrated. After a few days, either Sutil or Normand or both make a deal with Kiefer to turn over Prosper's agents and weapons on the assurance that the personnel will be treated well. While the details remain unclear, evidence points to Normand being far more involved than Sutil. Whatever each man reveals or does not, we know that Normand now begins to travel around the region with the Germans, pointing out arms dumps and ordering agents to surrender. Over the next couple of months, the Germans recover hundreds of weapons and arrest 12 F-section agents and hundreds, if not thousands, of French resistance. But the real tragedy of the collapse of Prosper is not just these immediate losses. As MRD Foote, SOE's official historian, will later write. The Germans' attack on Prosper and F's other circuits in and around Paris brought them a treble dividend. They secured a substantial quantity of parachuted arms, they arrested several hundred troublemakers, and they had in their hands two wireless sets, Normand's and Canadian McAllister's, complete with codes. With these radios and codes, Hans Kiefer and his chief wireless expert, Dr. Josef Götz, begins playing the Funkspiel. This involves sending messages back to SOE pretending that the agents are still at liberty, that their missions are progressing successfully, and requesting additional officers and more supplies. In some cases, Götz and his signals officers send the messages themselves, doing their best to imitate the agent's unique tapping style, or fists, on their Mark II transmitters. Other times, they direct the captive agents to transmit the messages themselves. Götz first tries to imitate Normand, but this is a failure, as we notice the discrepancies in the new messages. But Götz has more success with the Canadian. McAllister and SOE are convinced that his circuit, Archdeacon, has been successfully established. In fact, the ruse is so convincing that over a decade after the war, the head of F-Section, Maurice Buckmaster, will remain convinced that Archdeacon had been doing good work for SOE in Lorraine and Alsace. Götz repeats his exploits after Noor Inyan Khan's betrayal and arrest in October 1943. SOE are initially suspicious, but by the turn of the year, Götz has convinced London that Noor is still at liberty. By the spring of 1944, the SD are simulating the existence of at least 3 SOE circuits. The scale of the Funkspiel is quite astounding. In February 1944, 7 agents are parachuted in to join Noor's phono circuit. All 7 of them are arrested immediately upon landing by the Gestapo. 6 agents are also sent to join the non-existent archdeacon. All are captured. Some of them put up a fight, like Roger Sabourin and Adolphe Rabinovich, who land in a clearing at the edge of a wood on the night of March 2nd to 3rd. They're expecting a reception committee from Archdeacon. Instead, they hear German voices. They slip into the tree line and open fire. They kill 2 Germans, but are eventually overwhelmed by gunfire and are taken prisoner. As Astrid has often shown in her Spies and Ties series of our regular coverage of the war, German success here is as much down to SOE's poor security procedures as it is to German skill. SOE's code chief, Leo Marx, does quickly work out what's going on. For one thing, the messages his agents send home are often missing their security checks. These are deliberate signals, sometimes as misspelled word, which indicate whether an agent is at liberty or signaling under duress. Nor even sends over a specific 18-letter emergency code phrase that she had agreed with Marx before leaving. Marx takes his concerns to his boss, Buckmaster, but Buckmaster refuses to believe that SOE's circuits are compromised on such a disastrous scale. It is not until May 1943 that SOE accepts the awful truth. By that point, the Funkspiel has dragged about 20 of F Section's officers into captivity. Those 20 are just 1/3 of the almost 60 of F Section's men and women who are arrested across France from January 1st to June 6th. Of these, just 10 will survive the war. For the rest, death comes in the form of a bullet, a lethal injection, or simply through starvation and disease in the squalor of the German camp system. While the SD uses infiltration and radio games to deal with SOE in Paris and northern France, the Germans also deploy cold, hard military power against the swelling resistance groups in the south and southeast of the country. It is carried out in the operational tradition of the Nazi German anti-partisan military doctrine known as Bandenbekämpfung, or bandit warfare, usually associated with the Eastern Front and the Balkans. But as of 1944, those methods are increasingly common in France too, with thousands, even tens of thousands of guerrilla fighters facing off against the Wehrmacht and the SS. Until November 1942, German policy in the former unoccupied zone in the south had been relatively peaceful compared to the unrestrained brutality meted out in places like Poland, Belarus, and Yugoslavia. The Vichy administration and police forces oversaw the day-to-day running of the zone, with the Germans satisfied with installing a Feldkommandantur, or field garrison headquarters, in each département. In 1941, after a surge in communist resistance following the German invasion of the Soviet Union, the Germans install a higher police and SS leader in France and expand the role of the Gestapo and Sicherheitsdienst. But there is no need to go much further than this, especially as the Vichy regime collaborates with the Germans in deporting Jews and communists to their mortal fates in the East. The situation changes dramatically after the Germans take direct control of the South following the successful Operation Torch landings by the Allies in French North Africa in November 1942. Shortly afterwards, in February 1943, Vichy implements a tightening of the Service du Travail Obligatoire, the obligatory labor service. This hugely unpopular measure, which funnels hundreds of thousands of young men to Germany for forced labor, leads to a surge in resistance activity, but also to tens of thousands of young men slipping away into the countryside to join the rural armed resistance, the Maquis. Throughout 1943, the Maquis grow in strength, supported by inter-allied training missions from SOE, the American Office of Strategic Services, and the French Bureau Central de Renseignement et d'Action. The Royal Air Force and the United States Army Air Forces also fly hundreds of sorties, dropping in weapons and supplies. Now, the Maquis launch raids, ambushes, and hit-and-run attacks on German forces. In response, the Germans deploy regular military units against the Résistance for the first time in the autumn and winter of 1943. The first of these are small, more like police operations. In December 1943, the German army raids the town of Nantua in retaliation for a brazen resistance parade through the town of Oyonnax to mark Armistice Day the previous month. The Germans round up 100 people for deportation and execute the local resistance leader. But this is only the beginning. I've already talked about how the Germans set out to destroy the Maquis of the Vercours Plateau, infiltrating their ranks, launching raids, burning villages, and killing Maquis and civilians. Well, that pattern is repeated across the region. On the Glières Plateau, a group of about 700 Maquis launch an uprising after their leader is killed by French collaborationist forces. They resolve to turn their mountain home into a fortress. But although the Maquis are well versed in hit-and-run tactics, they do not have the experience or the heavy weapons necessary to triumph in an all-out defensive battle against the Wehrmacht. On March 26th, the German 157th Reserve Division, led by General Karl Pflaum, launches an assault on the plateau. By the end of the fighting, 210 Maquis are dead, including 50 Spaniards who fight to the last bullet. 169 Maquis are arrested. After the battle, the reprisals are equally violent. German forces tore the neighboring villages, burning homes, torturing and executing civilians. At Montmouchet, on the Massif Central in the Auvergne, on May 15th, the regional leader in the Auvergne agrees to another premature uprising. They are convinced that the liberation of France is coming soon and that if they turn their mountainous camps into a series of strongholds, the Allied forces will soon parachute in to assist them. Volunteers flock into the region for 2 weeks and are organized into fighting groups. Rifles, machine guns, grenades, and mortars are distributed. Transport vehicles are requisitioned from the local populations. By the beginning of June, there are 2,700 men at Montmouchet. At Clavières, one of the entrances to what the Maquis called the Réduit du Montmouchet, a sign is erected. Ici commence la France libre. Free France starts here. The Germans respond on June 2nd. Battle begins with a battalion of about 800 Osttruppen climbing Montmouchet. Outnumbered and outfought, the Osttruppen take heavy casualties during a 3-hour battle and are forced to retreat. By today, June 6th, German General von Brodowski is in the final stages of planning a mission to restore order and is assembling thousands of men equipped with armored cars, mortars, and air support. The Maquis of the Vercours, who this morning began fortifying their plateau into a high-altitude fortress, will also soon feel the force of the Bandenbekämpfung. Like the Maquis at the Massif Central, their strategy is contingent on the arrival of Allied paratroopers. And as I said earlier today, it's likely that those paratroopers will never arrive. But it isn't only German forces who are arrayed against the resistance. Frenchmen are also fighting Frenchmen. The security and policing forces of France can be divided into 2 camps. The regular French police are often ambivalent or even quietly supportive of the resistance. When the resistance marched through Oyonnax in November 1943, the French police observe the procession but do not interfere. Not only do the police have some sympathies with the resistance, but their willingness to provide wholehearted assistance to the Germans has been dampened by threats in the clandestine press. But there are plenty of willing collaborators. When General Karl Pflaum launches his first assault on the Glières Plateau, Frenchmen guard the entrances and seal the escape routes. When the Germans execute people after the battle, Frenchmen identify the targets. These are not regular police officers. They are not scared of the resistance or in any way sympathetic. They are sympathetic to the French fascists and German Nazis and have been recruited by the Vichy regime specifically to implement their authoritarian dictatorship. Some belong to the Groupe Mobile de Réserve, formed back in 1941 and independent from the regular national police. Others are members of the Fanatical Milice, a volunteer paramilitary organization which draws its force from the most ardent and sadistic fascist supporters of the regime. SOE and the resistance hate and fear the milice even more than the SD and Gestapo. A German may be spotted as a foreigner or fooled into revealing their foreign identity with some quick thinking and smooth talking. But as Morris Buckmaster will later write, the milice are indistinguishable from local people. They were able to permeate our organization with a confidence impossible to the Gestapo, and they had the power, like dry rot, of spreading their corrupting influence among both the discontented and the timid. The milice are happy to torture and execute resistance members. SOE agent George Mylar describes them as the scum of the jails brutalized of the most brutal cream of the awful. And as so often, brutality begets brutality. The Resistance's clandestine press publishes the names of collaborators and urges retribution. The communist newspaper writes, "To each new murder that they commit, expect immediate and merciless reprisals. The French resistance sends a warning. For an eye, both eyes. For a tooth, the whole jaw." In Nice and other towns and cities in the south, there is a near constant back and forth of attacks, assassinations, executions, and brutalization. So when the Allies are now securing a foothold in Normandy and SOE and the resistance have carried out countless acts of sabotage and preparation, they gear up to tie down German forces and obstruct their movement to Normandy. With the training, weapons, and ammunition they've received and their skills in sabotage, ambushes, and other hit-and-run tactics, they are placed to make a significant contribution to the Allied effort. But how successful the SOE and the guerrilla armies will be remains unwritten. The Germans continue to inflict a heavy toll on SOE's officers, and the events in the south of the country show that the resistance is clearly unable to match the Wehrmacht in open warfare. Whatever happens in the coming weeks and months, there will be a lot more pain for SOE and the French resistance to endure.
Here's a quote from Ada Gobetti that I think is apropos after that bit. "When I arrived in Miana this evening, I found Paolo very excited. He was at the radio all day long and was able to tell me the particulars. It is the very opening of that second front that we were awaiting for so long, and it appears that it was carried out with gigantic vessels and with an extraordinary technical efficiency. Yes, by now it is useless to try to deny its importance. It is a decisive event. It is certainly the beginning of the end, if not exactly the end. Yet it is strange how I do not feel profoundly and intimately touched. Perhaps it is because I am too occupied with innumerable little daily tasks that make it impossible for me to see the whole picture. Today, meeting with a new person prepared to work with us counts more for me than the movements of an immense army that is far away. Moreover, I cannot forget that inevitably every large-scale action of war is accompanied by destruction and massacre. We keep getting reminders that no one here is out of the woods yet. For the Allies, for the Axis, for the French at home, there is a great deal more suffering to be borne before anyone is out of the woods."
What about the people who intentionally put themselves in the woods again and again? The double agents.
Yeah, them. Here are the stories of two of them, central moving pieces of Operation Fortitude.
We begin with Dusan Dusko Popov, and we will focus on a somewhat controversial aspect of this agent. The reasons the Germans seem so easy to fool, it's a tale of double-cross of the double-cross, and betrayal at the highest level. At the center of the Germans' failure today is, of course, Hitler and his paralyzing control of strategy and tactical deployment of the German forces. Indy and Sparty have also shown many other problems with the German command structure and Nazi politics that get in the way of the German response. And then there is deception, and that works very well, right? So well that you'd almost think that the Abwehr is working for MI5. Are they? Duško Popov and his best friend and handler at the Abwehr, Johann Johnny Jepsen, might provide the answer. Now Popov is a fascinating character. He is dashing, charming, promiscuous, rich, cosmopolitan, complex, daring, and brutally ruthless. Current MI6 agent and future author Ian Fleming is a personal friend of his and will use him as one of his inspirations for James Bond 007. We've done a biography specially on him in our regular coverage, so I won't tell his whole story today. Instead, I will focus on Duško's and Johnny's relationship. The two meet in the mid-30s, while studying at University of Freiburg, Germany. Duško has come here from his native Serbia, where his father has built a very successful international trading business. Johnny is 5 years younger and arrives after him and makes quite an entrance. Now listen to that. He rolls into town in his Mercedes 540k. The first thing he does is pay a visit to the town's police commissioner. He lays down 2 envelopes filled with money on the commissioner's desk and tells him, you know, it will save time if I pay my traffic tickets in advance. The two soon form a whirlwind romance. Johnny's well of cash is even deeper than Duško's. His parents died when he was a teenager, and he has inherited his father's stake in the family business, the conglomerate Jepsen and Jepsen Shipping Company, based out of Hamburg. He spent time in England growing up and returned to Germany as a committed Anglophile, adopting English manners, even preferring English over German. His role model is P.G. Woodhouse's spoiled, useless, snobbish, but charming character, Bertie Wooster. Duško and Johnny's relationship is based almost entirely on frivolity, fast cars, expensive sports, gambling, partying, endless rows of fawning girls, preferably a few at once. So, how do these two good-for-nothings end up at the heart of world geopolitical affairs, you could ask yourself, right? Well, under the surface, they are dedicated intellectuals and humanists and despise the Nazi regime that controls Germany. Duško's disdain is rather outspoken. Johnny can't afford that as a German. Duško thinks he can, but he can't. Shortly before graduation in 1937, Duško is arrested by the Gestapo. Johnny and Popov Sr. pull some strings and get him out. So, when Johnny suddenly starts working with the Nazis, Duško is taken aback, to say the least. The two drift apart. Johnny disappears into the labyrinth of Nazi Germany, and Duško goes to Dubrovnik, where he opens a law firm and gets into the family business. Fast forward to 1940. The war has broken out, and suddenly Popov gets a telegram from his old friend summoning him to Belgrade. Need to meet you urgently. The reunion is like in the good old days. When the initial parting is out of the way, Jepsen tells Popov that he's working for the Abwehr. He tells him it allows him to stay out of active military service with his varicose veins and all. You know, that would be hell. So, he tells Popov that he too could benefit from working for the Abwehr. It would allow him to travel freely through occupied Europe, no questions asked. It would be a new adventure in espionage. Popov is attentive for some reason. Jepsen invites another Abwehr agent. He's called Ernst Munzinger. He tells Popov, "We have many agents in England, quite a number of them. Excellent. But your connections would open many doors. You could render us great service, and we could do the same for you." The Reich knows how to show its appreciation. Jepsen drinks his whiskey there and says nothing. Munzinger is somewhat vague about the kind of information Popov might gather. You know, general, political, and then after a pause, military? Duško agrees to do the work. He sets up in Lisbon, neutral Portugal, to better travel to the UK. But before he leaves not yet occupied Yugoslavia, he contacts the British legation. He informs them of this situation. And he becomes a double agent for the British and the Allies, codenamed Scoot and Tricycle. His exploits as an agent are many and quite spectacular. But that's a story for another day. Much of it is told in the video I referred to earlier. For our purposes today, his main exploit is to feed the Germans a huge amount of bogus information to reinforce the idea of an invasion at Berkel. But wait, this doesn't make any sense. How did Jepsen go from anti-Nazi to Nazi spy? Who the hell is Munzinger, and why is he so gullible? Why on earth did Popov betray his friend? In the immediate interactions between the three men, we have no clues. Nothing beyond the agreement to spy for Nazi Germany is spoken of as far as we know. Popov won't speak of it to anyone after the war. Not until he publishes a rather embellished autobiography in 1974, which also never explains this part of the story. So, let me speak the unspoken word. Jepsen was recruited to the Abwehr by a family friend, Hans Oster, who until April 1943 was the deputy head of the Abwehr. Oster worked for Wilhelm Canaris, who until February 1944 was the head of the Abwehr, and Munzinger was another deputy to Canaris. Now, Oster was ousted last year because it came out that a lot of things had gone wrong and there were traitors, double agents working for him. Canaris followed in February for the same reason. Munzinger left the service shortly after, officially for serving the required time, probably as part of their purge. After Canaris was ousted, the SS Sicherheitsdienst took over the Abwehr. Jepsen, by then also living in Lisbon, still working for the Abwehr, was drugged and kidnapped by the SD at the end of April. He is now languishing under torture in Sachsenhausen concentration camp. He has and will say nothing, if he indeed knows anything. With the records after the war, we know this though. Oster and Canaris are the heart of a conspiracy to ruin the German war effort and end Nazism. They also plotted against Hitler's life and tried to organize a coup. Canaris has deliberately led German secret leaks to the Allies, even secretly met them in Rome. Jepsen was recruited into a unit of the Abwehr that Canaris had set up as a dummy unit to save Jewish Germans by making them untouchable agents. Munzinger's record has been to recruit a row of useless or treacherous agents on Canaris' behalf. They have been playing a highly dangerous game, for which all four men will pay with their lives before the war is over. It has been based on an unspoken understanding of the united goal, and rests on that not one of them has known what the other ones are doing. The jewel of the crown of thorns they have slipped over Hitler's head is Popov. And although they are no longer in control, the cobweb of double agents they have woven into German intelligence continues to do its work to destroy Nazism from within. Today, on June 6, 1944, the openings they have given MI5 and the double-cross system have been instrumental to convince the German dictator and his minions that reality is fiction and fiction is reality. Our next double-cross agent is of a very special kind of importance. Her long deception messages in her own cipher are re-enciphered by her handlers using an Enigma machine and broadcast to Berlin. MI5 captured that communication. That provides Bletchley Park with a plain text, her encryption, and the re-encrypted Enigma message. The cryptographers can then reverse the process to get a key to crack a massive amount of other German communications. For bodyguard and fortitude, she is central in convincing the Germans that the invasion is coming at Pas-de-Calais, with possible incursions into Scandinavia. So, who is it? She is Natalie Lily Sergeyev, codenamed Treasure, and in 1944 she is 29 years old. She is Parisian, born in Imperial Russia, and multilingual. Lily is famously eccentric, an artist, adventurer, and idealist. According to Tar Robertson, she is also exceptionally temperamental and troublesome, but oh, so valuable, truly a treasure. In March 1944, she goes to Lisbon to meet her German handler. Now listen to this. Lily looks at him. She has received a new radio transmitter to better report on troop movements in England. She has just learned to take it apart and quickly put it together again. She is so fast. You're very good at this, huh, my dear? Thank you, she says, her thoughts drifting to Beirut in 1939, where she had stopped to earn some money working as a nurse on her Arthur on bike from Paris to Saigon. There she was, surprised by the German invasion of Poland. She stays in Beirut, where she gets news of the fall of France and imagines her beautiful Paris full of annoying boots and weird atmosphere. She thinks of what kept her sleepless during the nights there. Only one thought: liberate Paris from the Nazis. She remembers how crazy that felt when she woke up in the morning. But then again, it did not, because she came up with a concrete plan how to reach this lofty goal. She contacted a German friend, Felix Dassel, a journalist who wrote for different magazines about her unusual travels through Europe, who had actually written, "The girl has courage like three men, traveling this time on foot, next time or by bike, sleeping on the side of the road with only some laundry and a lot of drawing material in her backpack." Dassel had made her famous among other eccentrics, and then, out of the blue, one day in 1937 approached her to work for the Nazis as an informer. She had declined. But now it was different, and his offer became an integral part of her plan to liberate Paris. So she bikes back to Europe and contacts Dassel. 2 years of extensive training follow. She learns Morse code, ciphering, microphotography, using transmitters and secret ink. The Nazis call her Tramp, and she is very good at every part of her education. She is set up with a German case officer, Emil Kleemann, finally in Paris. Soon she will be sent to England to spy on the British. Back to Lisbon, looking at Kleemann, she remembers how when they met the first time, he had watched her carefully as she enthusiastically recited her invented story with travels through Hitler's Germany, how impressed she was with the Nazi regime, her admiring articles for the Germans in the French press, even mentioning her interview with Göring, who had promised a personal interview with Hitler. How she told him, "It will be easy for me to travel to Portugal, to Australia, or England. I have relatives in all those places." Then she thinks of arriving in London in 1943. The British custom official asked about her reasons for the stay. If she intended to visit family? Yeah? No. She had said, I'm going to spy for England. Soon she was face to face with Tar Robertson in his tartan trousers, smoking his pipe, asking a lot of penetrating questions while watching her. And then, a few days later, she was asked to join the double cross. Kleeman interrupts her thoughts and pulls her mind back to the present in March 44. Our only chance of winning right now is if we can throw them back into the sea. We have to know everything about the Allied plans for a landing on the European mainland. We will need exact weather reports from now on. It could be in Holland or Belgium or at Pas-de-Calais or in Normandy. You have to observe all troop movements. In 1 second, she is totally focused again and looks Kleeman in the eye and she says, listen, if the Brits should arrest me, they will force me to go on writing to you. I will use a double dash before I start writing, okay? Then you will know everything I say is total bollocks. Kleeman stares at her. How does it feel to be a young woman that has the opportunity to change the course of history? She pauses. Good, she says, not smiling. She feels sorry for him. She likes him. He treats her very well. Not like the British, who did not even manage to get her beloved terrier poodle Bubs to London when she started working for them. Now, Bubs is dead. She suddenly remembers what she had whispered in his little pink ear. This is a very dangerous game I'm playing, my little darling. Very dangerous. I could die. She knew it then, and she knows it now. Bubs died without her having the chance to be there, and Lily herself has only 6 more months to live. Her doctor said because of her failing kidneys. And despite all that misery, she is determined to lead the Nazis to Pas-de-Calais, away from the Calvados coast, so that finally Paris can be freed from the Nazis. What a plan. A few weeks after D-Day, her goal to free Paris fulfilled. Lily will be done with spying. She won't die quite as fast as predicted. She'll marry an American officer, move to the US, where in 6 years her kidneys will finally give in, and she will pass away only 38 years old. The vast majority of the thousands of soldiers whose lives she helped save today will never know that she even existed.
You may be wondering why we've devoted this time to individual spies.
But you have to realize their importance. They are the conduits for an army of deception, an enormous invisible army that has affected the events of this day as much as the men on the ground have.
But that is not at all to belittle the efforts of those brave men on the ground here today. And we'll take a deep dive with Paul into the deadliest beach of them all today, Omaha, when we return in hour 23.